What's up, guys? Welcome back to Book Demystified. I'm really glad you're here because today's book, Budget Like a Pro by Zoe McKey, dives into something we've all experienced but rarely understand. You know that moment when you sit down to look at your bank statement and think, where did all my money go? Like seriously, you made decent money this month, you weren't being crazy with spending, but somehow your account looks like you've been funding a small country's defense budget. And the worst part? You can't even remember what you spent most of it on. I was talking to my friend Sarah last week, and she told me she spent $47 at Target and came home with a candle, some chapstick, and 3 things she didn't even remember picking up. $47 for stuff she could have lived without. And before you judge her, be honest. When's the last time you walked into any store just to grab one thing and actually left with just one thing? Why does this keep happening in our lives? Why do our brains seem to sabotage our best financial intentions? And what if there's a real answer we've been missing all along? Something that goes deeper than just make a budget and stick to it. Well, this book has something powerful to say about that. And I'll tell you right now, it completely changed how I think about why we spend money the way we do. Zoe McKey isn't just another finance expert telling you to cut out your coffee habit. She's a behavioral psychology researcher who got curious about why smart people make dumb money decisions. And what she discovered is that most of our spending isn't really about the things we're buying, it's about the feelings we're trying to create or escape. We're not just budgeting money, we're budgeting emotions, and nobody ever taught us how to do that. The first major insight that hit me like a brick wall is what she calls spending triggers. These are emotional states that basically hijack your rational brain and turn you into a financial zombie. Think about it. When was the last time you made a big purchase when you were feeling totally calm and centered? Probably never, right? We buy stuff when we're stressed, bored, excited, sad, celebrating, procrastinating, or trying to impress someone. The actual item we're buying is just a vehicle for the feeling we're chasing. McKee breaks down the most common spending triggers, and honestly, reading this felt like someone had been following me around with a camera. There's retail therapy spending, where you buy stuff to make yourself feel better after a bad day. There's future self spending, where you buy things for the person you imagine you'll become, like that expensive workout equipment for the fitness enthusiast you're definitely going to be next month. There's social proof spending, where you buy stuff because everyone else seems to have it, even though you don't actually want or need it. But here's what's really crazy. Once you start paying attention to these triggers, you realize they follow predictable patterns. Like I notice I always want to buy stuff online late at night when I'm tired and my willpower is shot. Or how I'm way more likely to overspend when I'm feeling stressed about work. It's like your emotions are playing tricks on your wallet. And the first step to winning this game is recognizing when you're being played. The second game-changing concept McKee introduces is something she calls values-based budgeting. Most budgeting advice focuses on cutting expenses and tracking every penny, which honestly makes budgeting feel like punishment. But McKee flips this completely. Instead of starting with restrictions, you start by figuring out what actually matters to you, what brings you genuine satisfaction and joy, and then you structure your spending around those priorities. Here's how this works in real life. Instead of having a generic entertainment category in your budget, you might realize that what you really value is experiences with friends, learning new skills, and supporting local businesses. So you might budget more for concert tickets and cooking classes, but less for streaming services you barely use. Instead of just having a clothing budget, you might realize you value quality over quantity. So you save up for a few pieces you absolutely love instead of constantly buying cheap stuff that falls apart. I'm not going to lie, this approach requires some serious self-reflection. You have to get honest about the difference between what you think you should want and what actually makes you happy. But once you figure this out, budgeting stops feeling like deprivation and starts feeling like intentional living. You're not restricting yourself, you're directing your money towards the things that align with who you actually are and what you actually care about.
Hey, if you're getting value from these summaries and want to help us keep going, you can support us in a few simple ways. Subscribe, join as a member, or grab the book using our affiliate link below. And if you're feeling generous, you can even leave a tip via the thanks button available on the video. Every bit helps us bring you more like this. The third insight that completely changed my perspective is what McKey calls the spending psychology audit. This is basically becoming a detective of your own financial behavior. For 1 month, every time you spend money, you write down not just what you bought and how much it cost, but what you were feeling right before you made the purchase and what you were hoping the purchase would do for you. This sounds simple, but it's actually revolutionary. You start to see patterns you never noticed before. Maybe you spend money every Sunday night because you're dreading Monday morning at work. Maybe you overspend on groceries when you're feeling guilty about not cooking enough. Maybe you buy clothes when you're feeling insecure about your appearance. Once you see these patterns, you can start addressing the root cause instead of just dealing with the financial symptom. McKey shares this story about a client who couldn't figure out why she kept overspending on home decor. Through the spending audit, she realized she was buying stuff for her apartment every time she felt lonely. She wasn't really trying to make her space look better. She was trying to make it feel more like home, more comforting, more like the kind of place where she belonged. Once she understood this, she could address the loneliness directly through social activities and friendships, and her urge to constantly redecorate basically disappeared. The fourth major concept is what she calls conscious spending pauses. This is a technique where you create a small buffer between the urge to buy something and actually buying it. It doesn't have to be complicated. Maybe you put items in your online shopping cart, but wait 24 hours before checking out. Maybe you take a picture of something you want in a store and give yourself a week to decide if you still want it. Maybe you have a rule that any purchase over $50 requires a conversation with a trusted friend first. The point isn't to never buy anything. It's to make sure your purchases are actually intentional instead of just reactive. McKey found that most people who use spending pauses end up buying about 40% fewer things, but they're way more satisfied with the things they do buy because they've had time to think about whether they really want them and why. Here's what I love about this approach. It's not about deprivation or guilt or feeling bad about wanting things. It's about awareness and intentionality. You can still buy stuff you want, but you're doing it consciously instead of unconsciously. You're making financial decisions that align with your actual values and goals instead of just reacting to whatever emotional state you're in at the moment. The book also dives into something that doesn't get talked about enough in traditional budgeting advice: the social and emotional costs of trying to budget in a culture that's constantly trying to sell you stuff. We're surrounded by advertisements, social media posts about other people's purchases, friends who spend differently than we do, and family members who might not understand our financial goals. Learning to budget isn't just about math. It's about developing the psychological tools to stay grounded in your own values when everything around you is trying to influence your spending decisions. McKey talks about creating what she calls spending boundaries. Clear guidelines for yourself about when and how you'll make financial decisions. Maybe you don't shop when you're emotional. Maybe you don't make big purchases without sleeping on it first. Maybe you have a monthly fun money budget that you can spend guilt-free on whatever you want, but once it's gone, it's gone. These boundaries aren't rules imposed from outside. They're commitments you make to yourself to support your own financial well-being. The final piece that really stuck with me is how McKey reframes the whole concept of budgeting success. Most people think they're good at budgeting if they stick to their budget perfectly every month, and they think they're bad at budgeting if they overspend. But McKey suggests that budgeting success is actually about increasing your awareness of your financial patterns and making more intentional choices over time. It's not about perfection, it's about progress and consciousness. This takes so much pressure off the whole process. Instead of feeling like a failure every time you spend money on something that wasn't in your budget, you can just notice what happened, get curious about why it happened, and use that information to make better decisions going forward. You're not trying to become a robot who never wants anything. You're trying to become someone who understands their own financial psychology and can work with it instead of against it. Look, this book isn't going to give you a magic budget template that will solve all your money problems overnight. What it will do is help you understand why you spend money the way you do and give you tools to make those spending decisions more conscious and intentional. And honestly, that's way more valuable than any specific budgeting technique. Because once you understand your own financial psychology, you can adapt and adjust your approach as your life changes. You're not just following someone else's rules, you're creating a financial system that actually works for who you are and what you care about.